Welcome, everybody. Good to see everyone again after what was a bit of a hiatus for me in Israel. Then we were sort of on a bit of the winter break, but now we're back in it with gusto. Okay, so here we go. Why? Okay. Hold on one second. Trying to figure out why. Why we're. I'll just bring it up. Here on the right screen. Okay. Is everyone seeing? I'm just making sure that the screen is properly being shared. I'm not entirely sure if I'm getting this correct. Do people see the closing of the curtains on Bereshit and Joseph? Is that what's being seen at the moment? Or my screen sharing is paused? Hold on, let's try this again.
Nothing.
Okay, let's try this again. Okay, I'm gonna try one. All right, we can try this one other way. Sharing screen. Why does it not? All right, let's try it. All right, we'll share our desktop. There we go. Okay, sharing the desktop. And okay. You are seeing closing of the curtains on Bereshit and Joseph?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So okay. And those in the room will hopefully see this soon as well. But we'll I promise we'll get this all set. All right. There we go. All right. So here we are. This week's Parsha is, of course, Vayechi. But Vayechi really is, it's the end of the book of Bereshit, and it is the end of a subsection of the book of Bereshit, which is really the Joseph story. And the Joseph story starts really maybe 4 weeks ago. The Parshiot are Vayeshev, Miketz, Vayigash, Vayechi. There are 4 Parshiot, which are the Joseph story. They bring the book to a conclusion, and the truth of the matter is that they really play a critical narrative importance. And I want to make the argument that this is really the case for the entire book of Bereshit. So I apologize for those of you who are in this room who can't see this just yet, but it will. If some of them, I think what I do is I leave the lights on in the other bank over there. But oh, there you go. Okay. No, the other in the women's section. Turn the women's section on. No, you have to go into the women's section to turn that on. Okay. Okay, so am I my brother's keeper? Right. This is Hashomer Achi Anochi. This is what comes up from the very beginning of the Torah, which is a very interesting way to look at the entire book, because Cain and Hevel, they're these 2 brothers. They are in a way competing for attention. The reason I can reasonably say that they are competing for attention is that when Cain brings his offering, right? The Torah says about Hashem, El Cain ve'el minchato lo sha'a. To Cain and to his offering, God did not pay attention. And so there is this sort of sense of competition between these 2 brothers that at least arguably can be said to lead to Cain's desire to eliminate the competition, right? And after he eliminates the competition, maybe he didn't know what he was doing. Maybe he didn't know entirely that he would kill his brother. But either way, it's fairly clear that he is trying to take his brother's competition out of the picture. And in doing so, when Hashem confronts him, his answer is, Hashomer Achi Anochi, am I my brother's keeper? And in many ways, this is a question which remains unanswered. Cain uses that term as a foil. He uses it as a way of saying, you know what? I don't have any responsibility here. This is not exactly a perfect scenario. And we don't really have a good example of two brothers who get along well, or at least a family that is entirely unchallenged by the sibling rivalry up until and including the generation of Joseph, right? In fact, one might argue that the generation of Joseph is almost as bad as the generation of Cain and Hevel, because after all, they sell their brother into slavery. Now, a very interesting point that I heard made by the biblical scholar Uriel Simon. Is this still blinking? Hold on. Yossi? Not sure. This is blinking like crazy, and so I don't know. I can't potchkey with it while teaching. Well, no, I want to. Maybe there's something. It's not obvious to me how to fix this, but maybe there is a way. I don't know. Okay, I'm going to leave that up to you, and I'm going to continue on. Okay, so one could ask an interesting question, and I will present this question to you. Why is it that Jacob gives his son a coat of many colors? What compels him to do that?
Because he's from Rachel, his favorite wife. So he's spoiling him extra long and long. Yeah, extra long.
Okay, so maybe give him an extra polka from the Shabbos chicken.
Well, it's bad parenting for sure.
Sorry, what's that, Annie?
Bad parenting.
Even the Rambam agrees with you that it's bad parenting. He says we learn from this that person should not be a favorite, play favorites. Tell you all of you right now writing wills, distribute to your children equally, and if you don't, there should be a good reason. If you gave one child, an extraordinarily large amount for the down payment for their house, you might say to the others, look, the accounting is fair. It just happened in different sequence, but ultimately you have to have an argumentation for the fairness. Okay, Gabi, you were going to say something. It's what the coat symbolizes. Okay, good. What does the coat symbolize?
It's the multicolor. So
Joseph being the only one who will be able to cultivate the values of Judaism. So Gabi wants to say it is Jacob saying, Joseph, you're the only one who can cultivate the values of Judaism. I hear your interpretive point and its symbolism, but he's not compelled to do that. He could have said just as well, Joseph, you should know that you know business, you know Torah, combine them both together. He doesn't have to tell the other ones they're nothing. I would say that it was a colossal failure because it gets ripped off of him and dipped in blood. Short-term loss, long-term gain. I'm not sure I can agree with that, Gavi. I think that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think it's a. When I hit this button, it just stays still. But
on my side.
Yeah.
Well, let's try without this dongle, and let's just go right into the HDMI port. See if that works. Hold on. Shine a light on my computer if you don't mind.
Sure.
Then we just go straight into HDMI. Does that help us? That's not HDMI over there. Sorry, 1 second. Let's see if that. Okay. Let's see if this does any better. Oops. Here. Let's move the projector closer if you don't mind. Super short HDMI cord. Fun.
Oh. So you have a message?
Working?
Oh, stop.
Okay. So what it tells you is the dongle is not necessary and not helpful. Okay. Okay. So Gabi wanted to tell us that, oh, sorry, we'll go back one slide. Gabi wanted to tell us that the coat of many colors is a symbolic sense of Joseph's future role in the combination of Torah and financial success in the diaspora. I think that's a cute interpretation. I'm not sure that that is an interpretation that would come out of a literary reading of this section. And so we're kind of looking at a literary reading as opposed to perhaps a Kabbalistic reading or some of the other types of readings. So Uriel Simon's argument is, I think, a very interesting one. He says what Yaakov is trying to do, what every parent does. What does every parent do? They try to help their children avoid the traumas of their own childhood, right? So what was the trauma of Yaakov's childhood? Imposter syndrome, right? He could never be certain, or maybe it took him a long time to be certain. He had to wrestle with an angel to be certain that he was in fact the right child, right? But of course, one of the things that the Torah is telling us is that without struggle, you got nothing, right? I'm putting everybody on mute. Please feel, if you have a comment, please feel free to unmute yourself. I just want to eliminate any of the background noise in this. And so here we are, coat of many colors. Yaakov is trying to undo it, but of course he can't succeed because Joseph has to go through his own journey and he is going to have to prove himself. Prove himself he does, but the coat of many colors turns out to be, in a way, a shortcut that does not really help Joseph succeed, at least in a direct fashion. And so I think that that's sort of a very interesting way of moving forward the story. Now, I had started though by, actually, let me go back with one other point, right? The story of Joseph and his brothers in certain ways is also parallel to the story of Yaakov and Esav, right? You have two brothers struggling for position and wondering, am I my brother's keeper versus am I going to be the one to succeed my parents? It is sort of a competition between the verticality of the relationship, who's going to succeed the parent, and the horizontality of it, of you have to take care of your brothers at the same time. The story of Joseph is going to be one which is going to deal with that, if you will, the horizontality of that. It's going to focus on the importance of that family relationship. And it's going to look at it from the most strained possible scenario that there can be. Now, there's a very interesting turning point in the story. In the story, just to sort of cover some of the basic points, they sell their brother into slavery. Judah says, first they suggest killing him, but Judah says, "Ma betza ki naharog et achenu." What profit is there going to be out of that? Let's not kill him, right? We'll sell him to the Ishmaelim, and they put him into a pit, and they sell him to the traveling merchants, and immediately after that, we have this moment where the Torah is going to tell us that Judah descended from among his brothers. Vayered Yehuda me'et echav. This is a sign that Judah has descended not just geographically but spiritually, and the story has its own sort of twists and turns, which I'm not going to go into, but it has a very strong tie-in to the end of the last story. So these are two stories. You can see that these two verses that I've put up here are Bereshit 37:32 and 38:25. So they're a chapter apart. The bolded words Hakerna appears only twice in all of Tanakh, and those in these two twinned chapters. In the first chapter, these words Hakerna, it says Vayishalachu et ketonet hapasim. They sent the coat of many colors. This is after they have ripped it up and dipped it in an animal's blood. Vayivihu el avihem, and they brought it to their father. Vayomeru, and they said, Zot matzanu, we found this. Hakerna, recognize, please. Haktonet bincha hi imlo. Is this or is this not your son's coat? Right? And so we have this sort of double sting, right? Number one, you thought he was special, turns out not, right? That's sort of a sticking it in your face to their father. And the other is it is this family recognition. Do you recognize, is there a part of you which is going to own a certain kind of recognition, a certain kind of responsibility in this? Now, in the following chapter, after they have sold Joseph, after he has quote unquote, or after the fake news of his death by wild animal, the story of Judah is one where ultimately Judah visits a prostitute. The prostitute happens to be his daughter-in-law, through whom the mitzvah of yibum, of levirate marriage, can be consummated simply by an act of cohabitation or of intimacy, which is what happens. But then this daughter-in-law becomes pregnant. Now, if she had become pregnant to any stranger in the world, the law would have been that she would have been guilty of the death penalty. And that's what they imagined had happened, because Judah doesn't know with whom he had intimate relations. And they are taking her out to be burnt at the stake, and she takes the 3 pledges that he put in her hands. Those 3 pledges are a signet ring, a set of cords, sort of identifying tribal symbol, very much like the tzitzit. The patilim is what they're called, and the tzitzit are called a patil techelet, which means the cord of blue that we have that shows that we're from the tribe of God, so to speak. He would have had a set of cords that represented what tribe he was from. And the third thing is his mateh, his staff. All of them are sort of symbols of either family, leadership, authority. And she says, it says, himutzeit, she was taken out, v'hi shalacha el chami halemor, and she sent to her father-in-law saying, li'ish asher eilalo, the person to whom these 3 things belong, anochi hara, I have conceived with. Vatomer, and she says to him, hakerna, recognize, lemi hachotemet v'apatilim v'amata'ila. To whom do these cords, this staff, and this signet belong? Right? So the narrator wants you to know that you need to do the work of connecting these 2 stories. These 2 stories, a story in which Judah is blatantly not responsible for his family, but is taught to be so by this woman Tamar, and the story where he presents this to his father as a sign of, look what you have done, or look what has happened to the one you picked. These 2 things need to be connected. The story of the brothers will take a radical turn after this particular moment, because chapter 37 is the sale of Joseph. Chapter 38 is the incident with Tamar and Yehudah, and chapter 39 is Joseph goes down to Egypt, right? And the story of Joseph in Egypt and Potiphar, and then you have the story of the butler and the baker, etc. Right? You have Joseph in jail. You have the stories of Joseph. After the story of butler and the baker, what do you have? You have Joseph. He is elevated to the house of Pharaoh. And after he's elevated to the house of Pharaoh, there's a famine in the whole Middle East. And that's when the family comes down. And then we re-encounter the brothers of Joseph. And we re-encounter them as changed individuals. How do we know that they are new people? So when they are in front of Joseph, right? Joseph does not reveal himself to them. This, we talked a little bit about this on Shabbos, that this is a very poignant question, that why does Joseph, it's 6 days journey between where Joseph lives and where his family lives, possibly less, maybe 5.5. How come Joseph does not tell his father that he is fine? And to this, there are many answers, but I think one of the strong contenders for this answer is that Joseph's dreams have not come true yet. His 2 dreams, right? The dreams of the stars in the sky and the dreams of the sheaves of wheat, that are all that bow down to him in the center. Those have not come true. He's waiting for those to come true. Now, there's a lot of debate about, how much are you going to listen to your dreams, right? Would you not? Is it appropriate to ignore the mitzvah of kibud av v'em and not and listen to your dreams? That would seem like a tall order. I would not suggest to any of my congregants to abuse their parents in any fashion because of dreams that you have, no matter how clearly it seems like God is speaking to you in those dreams. However, there's another piece of the puzzle. And the other piece of the puzzle, and this Rabbi Yaakov Meidan emphasizes, is that Joseph needs to see the repentance, the repair of his family. He needs an answer, not perhaps to the exact question of, am I my brother's keeper, but to the same idea of, why were you guys not protecting Joseph, right? Instead, you were his assailants. And there's this moment where the brothers do not think that Joseph speaks Hebrew. They assume that he's just another Egyptian. And they say, Vayomru ish el achiv. And they said one to the other, Aval ashemim anachnu. We are guilty. Al achenu asher ra'inu tzarat nafsho. We saw the pain of his soul. Bitchanano elenu, when he pleaded with us, velo shamanu. And we did not listen to him. Al kain ba'in lanu hatzara hazot. Therefore, this trouble has come upon us. As Uriel Simon points out, when they throw Joseph in the pit, it's as if God isn't watching. It's as if the messages that God gave to Joseph through his dreams, they thought they could overcome. But now it's quite a different lesson. Now the lesson is, we thought no one was watching, but in fact, there is a lot that is being watched here, right? And so they come to understand the sense of real accountability in all of this. And Joseph hears them say, Ashemim anachnu, we are guilty. There's a very interesting aspect of Joseph, by the way. Joseph will cry 3 times in this narrative. It's a very emotional, or a very emotionally expressive character. I don't want to suggest that Joseph was more emotional than other people, but we see a lot more of Joseph's emotion than we will of any other character. And so he plays this sort of split role, right? He has, on the one hand, he is this cold and unfeeling Egyptian viceroy, and on the other hand, he is this desperately sad. Well, I shouldn't say desperately sad, but he's a very emotional, a very caring, a very feeling individual vis-a-vis his brothers, and he often cries about the scenario of his family. But for Joseph, this is a very important moment, because at this moment, Joseph is not saying, those scoundrels, I hope they rot in hell. This is a moment for Joseph. He says, okay, they finally figured it out, right? They learned. Okay. Now, when Joseph finally reveals himself to his brothers, he is eminently concerned with this idea of repair. Va'ata, now, al ta'atzvu va'al yichar beinechem ki mechartem oti hena. Don't you guys worry that I know you sold me here, right? That's not in dispute. Why? Va'al yichar beinechem, do not let it be a problem in your eyes. Ki lemichya shalachani Elohim, because God sent me to be a provider before you, right? That God sends me to here ahead of you. Joseph is telling them, I do not see this as your fault. I see this as part of my destiny, right? So he sees a certain measure of destiny in this, and his destiny is his ability. It provides him at least an alternative narrative. There's a very interesting idea here, which is that you can choose to write a script that governs your emotions, right? There is no question Joseph could have written a narrative. Yeah, I did a lot of good things here, and God gave me the opportunity to do a lot of good things, but my brothers are scoundrels. They're horrible, and they should rot in hell. Right? He could have supported both of those narratives. He chooses to take one narrative and replace the other. I think a very important piece of that puzzle. It's a very, very instructive, and just as sort of the Tanakh as an instructive document is each of us can think of a time when someone offended us. Each of us can think of a time when someone did us wrong. Each of us can think of a time when somebody backstabbed us. Somebody took something that we thought was coming to us. We all have those stories. Occasionally we nurse those narratives in our minds. Ain't none of us got a story as bad as his, right? And there's nobody here who spent 21 years away from his family, spent multiple years in jail, years as a slave, then years in jail, sexual harassment, all sorts of problems. Nobody has a story as bad as his. And it was his own family who did it to him. And yet he chooses to interpret a different narrative. So I think that's a very, very powerful lesson in that. Okay. Now, what I want to see now is we're going to see that there are two stories that are going to now overlap. We're going to have both the personal story of Joseph and the national narrative of the Jewish people. Those two are going to sort of blend together. Of course, in the book of Shemot, we're going to go almost entirely to a national narrative. But here we're in this transition between a family narrative and a national narrative. And the national narrative comes together as Joseph has a reunion with his brothers. And remember when we started this series, we talked about how the book, the Tanakh is, to a certain extent, it is farmers versus shepherds, right? Now, Pharaoh represents the ultimate in farmers, right? The Nile is the hydraulic culture, right? That's where they grow grain, right? That is what Joseph is harvesting all these years. The years of plenty and the years of famine, Joseph is collecting grain from the population. He is taxing them and putting them in storehouses. And when the brothers come down, he tells them, represent to yourselves to Pharaoh as shepherds. The family is meant to keep its identity as a family of shepherds, right? And so he says, then Joseph came and reported to Pharaoh, saying, my father and my brothers with their flocks and herds and all that is theirs have come from the land of Canaan and now are in the region of Goshen, right? These are shepherds. That is how they represent themselves to Pharaoh. That in a way Joseph is keeping them in Goshen. He is in a sense trying to preserve the character of the family against what is Egypt. And there is in Parshat Vayigash, the end of Vayigash, the last aliyah of Vayigash is very much a contrast between the world of the shepherds and the world of the farmers. And we'll see that in a very, very sharp detail. Sorry, that was an errant slide. There's an interesting relationship, though, that comes about between Yaakov and Yosef. When Yaakov comes down, before Yaakov sees Joseph, he says, Vayomer Yisrael Rav Od Yosef Beni Chai. He says, does my son Joseph still live? I need to see Joseph before I die. But when he sees Joseph, he doesn't call him his son. Vayomer Yisrael Yosef Amut apam acharei ro'oti et panecha ki odechachai. He says, now I can die because I have seen that you were alive. There's an interesting version of this that Leon Cass reads. I think it's worth entertaining to a certain extent. Is that the Joseph that Yaakov placed the coat of many colors upon is a very different Joseph than the Joseph that represents the Joseph that Yaakov imagined he would raise. But the Joseph he meets is not the Joseph that he imagined he would raise. The Joseph that he meets is a Joseph who fronts as an Egyptian. He looks Egyptian. When Joseph cries on Jacob's neck, Jacob does not cry back. Jacob cried back on Esau's neck, but does not cry back on Joseph's. There's something about their relationship which is in a sense strained. And maybe there's no place which is more strained than in this week's Parsha, right? And Israel said to Joseph, who are these? Vayar Yisrael et bnei Yosef. Joseph, and Israel saw the sons of Yosef, Vayomer mi Elah. Who are these two, right? He does not recognize Manasseh and Ephraim, right? These are two individuals who seem strange to him, perhaps so different that he can't totally understand. Now, here's where I think that this difference between the idea of the shepherd and the idea of the farmer come into very interesting contrast. The book of Vayechi, the last aliyah of Vayigash details what happens when the years of famine continue to advance. Hold on, I'm gonna pull this up. Okay, let me just. Okay, so, okay, let me just make it a little bigger. Okay. There was no bread in all the world, and the famine was very severe, both in the land of Egypt and Canaan. And Joseph gathered all the money that was to be found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan as payment for the rations that were being produced. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's palace. Now, this is sort of interesting. What had happened was Joseph had taxed all the people. Now, in Canada, we would expect our government to tax us and then support us. That's kind of what happened at COVID, right? We'll get later on to, I assume the Torah's expectation, but here there is no charity involved at all. Pharaoh was able to collect in anticipation of the trouble, and then he sold it. Vayitoma kesef me'eretz Mitzrayim, and the money ran out in the land of Egypt and Canaan. Vayavo kol hamitzrim el Yosef le'mor hava lanu lechem. They said, Joseph, we need bread. V'lama namut negdecha ki afes kasef. Just because the money is gone, why should we have to die? Vayomer says, havu miknechem. Bring your livestock, and I will sell you against your livestock if the money is gone. So they bring their livestock, right? And the next year, and in the next year, they said, we cannot hide from my Lord that with all the money and animal stocks that have been given over to Pharaoh, nothing is left at my Lord's disposal save our persons and our farmland. Only thing we have left to sell is ourselves and our land. Lama namut leinecha gam anachnu gam admatenu. Why should we should die in front of you, ourselves and our land? Knei otanu admatenu. By us, right? This is all of a sudden there's really a transformation of all of Egypt into slavery, right? Where Pharaoh now comes to own all of the lands. We will be slaves to Pharaoh. Right? So that the land does not become waste, we will become slaves to Pharaoh. Vayaken Yosef et kol admat Mitzrayim the Pharaoh, and Joseph acquired all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh. Ish sadeu ki chazak aleim hara'av v'ti haaretz leFaro. Now the whole land is Pharaoh, right? Ve'et ha'am hevir oto le'arim, and he moved all of the people into cities, right? The farmers now become city folk, right? I guess Pharaoh owns all the land. Maybe people go out every morning to the fields. Rak admat hakohanim lo kana. Only the priests got an exemption. Vayomer Yosef el ha'am hein kaniti etchem hayom et madachem leFaro hey lachem zero zaretchem et haaretz. Right? Joseph says, okay, you now belong to Pharaoh. Here's some grain. Here's the seed for the new wheat crop. Go out and sow the land. Vaya b'tfuat nutatem chamishit leFaro va'abat yadot yeh lachem lezera. Forevermore, 20% tax. Right? Now, Pharaoh takes 20% off the top of everything. And they're great. You saved our lives, right? Brilliant guy. We now owned by Pharaoh, and he takes 20% off the top. Okay? And this became law in Egypt up until and including the day in which this is written. And the Jewish people live separately. They live in the land of Goshen. Right, and they are the shepherds out there in the land of Goshen. Okay, now this to me is the split screen between two things that are happening, and I think when Uriel Simon points out the Joseph crying, you see sort of two stories going on. One story is the story of Joseph, who is the brother. Oh, there's a thread that I forgot to connect here. Right, the brothers they felt this guilt at the very end. To the question of am I my brother's keeper, Yehuda stands up and says, I'll go to jail for my brother Benjamin. I will do anything for him. Right? So the story of these brothers ultimately does come together. Story of the brothers comes together. The answer of am I my brother's keeper is solved because Joseph is going to say that that's because Judah stands up and says, I will take care of my brother Benjamin. I won't let him go to jail. I will myself sacrifice for him. And so you have Joseph who tries to repair the family, Judah who stands up to repair the family. We have the brothers accepting guilt, seeing how God visited this difficulty upon them. And that's only on one half of the screen. The other half of the screen is that the entire world is becoming enslaved, right? That nobody's taking care of their brother. This is oppression. The city is exact opposite of taking care of your brother. The city is the enslavement of your brother. The exact thing that happened to Joseph to a certain extent, the fact that he was thrown into a pit and became a slave, is what's happening to the people of Egypt. It's sort of this very, very crazy inversion. And this will set up, to me, the book of Shemot. Because the book of Shemot, we have to take the people out of the pit again. And when the people come out of the pit, very interesting the things that happen to them, or that they're required to do out of the pit, right? The people are required to give, again, it's close to 20%. There are 2 masrot. Who are they supposed to give it to? Who are, interestingly, landless. The priests in Egypt get an exemption to keep the land. Jewish priests have no land and are recipients of charity. The owners of the land have to give, there's another 10% that goes to other landless people, people. There's actually the first 10% goes to the Kohen, the Shevet Levi, who are landless. The second 10% gets either shared in Jerusalem or has to be given to the poor, right? So that you have this sense that it is not to the crown that the fifth is given, but it is to the needy that the fifth is given, right? That's inversion number one. Inversion number two is that there is a requirement to leave a portion of your field to those who are needy so they can glean of their own. Inversion number three, very interesting inversion, is there is in the Torah, it is absolutely impossible to aggregate the land in perpetuity because there's a mitzvah called the Yovel, the Jubilee year, where every slave and every slave goes free and all the land goes back to its original ownership. And every 7 years there is a, if you will, there's a bit of a release of debt and release of the land. All of these, there's sort of a safeguard against the evils of the agricultural society that are built into the laws of the Torah. And it is in a way, it is an inversion of this very chapter. Chapter 47 gets, in a way, legally inverted in the book of Shemot. And it's the book of Shemot. If you read the Ten Commandments, there's a very interesting aspect of the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments will tell you that everybody has to have a day off on Shabbat, including the animals, right? You get this very strong sense from the book of Shemot that the idea of every creature needs to respect that God created the world, where every creature is given an opportunity to live as a direct relation of God, regardless of their station, whether they are the animal or servant or anything else. They have that one day to belong to God. And so it's, to me, it's a very interesting thing that the way in which the end of the book of Bereshit, in the same moment that the family of Israel is rescued, the operation of Egypt represents sort of a replay, if you will, of the pit. I will just say there's one other very interesting moment, just in case you thought you missed the final just in case you thought you missed the story of Joseph and his brothers and this sibling rivalry. The very end, Yaakov passes away, and they take Yaakov back to Israel. They bury him in the Marat Machpelah, and they come back to Egypt. It says, "Vayiru achei Yosef ki met avihem," and the brothers of Joseph saw that their father had passed away. This is, by the way, you should know that the word vayiru in the Torah very often means they deduced or they understood. It doesn't always mean to see. And it's clear in this case that they did not, it wasn't that they saw their father died. I'm sure they did also saw that their father died. But this is a cognitive see. They saw what was going on. They interpreted a situation. Their father was dead. The person protecting us from our brother's retribution is dead. And they say, Vayomru lu yistemenu Yosef. You know, what if Joseph is going to take revenge against us? Vashev yashiv lanu et kol hara'a asher gamalnu oto. And he's going to pay us back for all the horrible things we did to him. Vayitzavu al Yosef lemor. And they said to Joseph, Avicha tziva lifnei moto lemor. Our father made the following deathbed declaration. While you were administering things in Egypt, our father made a declaration. Kotomeru li Yosef. This is what you should say to Joseph. Anasana pesha achecha v'chatatam. You need to forgive your brothers and their sin. Ki ra'a gimalucha, because they did evil to you. V'ata sana lefesha avde. Please forgive their sin. Avdei Elohei Avicha, those who they who serve the God of your father. And what's the words that were the last four words there? Vayef Yosef b'dabram elav.
Yes,
And Yosef cries again. This is the third time Yosef cries, and Yosef cries speaking to them. Now, we could argue, why does Joseph cry? But let's take a moment and speculate. Why does Joseph cry here?
maybe because he's guessing they're lying, that the father never said such thing.
They certainly could. First of all, there's no indication that the brothers ever tell Yosef, their father, what happened. That doesn't ever seem to come up. That, by the way, Dad, just so you know, after all this time, guess who it was who sent Yosef down here? There's no conversation. Oh, bye, Yosef, would you mind showing me the scars you got from that wild animal? Right?
Rabbi? Hello?
So he says he's forgiven them, but they think he's only forgiven them because their father wouldn't have it otherwise. Yes.
But that's not, he never said that. Yaakov never said that to them. Not in the Parsha anyway.
I'm not saying he did, but okay. Well, hold on. So wait, Andy, before you go, Lynn had something to say.
I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well.
Could he be crying because after all that's happened, he feels that his brothers still don't trust him?
Oh, thank you. He 10 ways from tomorrow, he's trying to tell him that he's a good brother. And now they're still afraid of him. He feels like they still don't trust him. They just live in fear of him. Poor lonely Yosef. Right? Poor lonely guy. Right? Now, Annie, you were making a different point. You want to make your point?
Well, I was making the point that the father Yaakov never told the brothers never told the brothers to tell Yosef that he swore to them not to so Yosef to forgive them and not blame them anymore.
I totally agree with you that this line is a fabrication, but I'm saying even more than you're saying. I'm saying Yaakov never even knew that there was a sin.
That's right.
How could he command them not to forgive a sin that he didn't know happened?
Exactly. They never told him and he never knew. Yeah.
He never told him. So the Talmud understands this as an example of one of the reasons you're allowed to lie for the sake of peace.
So why would he, how would he reconcile with the brothers from the coat full of flesh with blood and now Joseph being perfectly in health with health?
How would I reconcile it? I mean, I know how I reconcile because I know the story. He wasn't attacked by an animal. The father was a brilliant man, and yet he did not put one and one together and say, if I favor one son above the others, that it's going to make a problem in my family.
Bad parenting, yeah.
I'll tell you, Gabi, I'll tell you how the Talmud or the Midrash is bothered by this, right? And how is the Midrash is so bothered by it that they say that there was an oath that they all took, which included Yitzchak, that they were never going to tell Yaakov what really happened. Right? Now, you and I both know as parents, there are times when we just simply ignore things because we don't really want to hear the answer. Right? I mean, maybe you're different than me. There are times when I'm just as happy not to know the gory details. Glad it all worked out. Don't tell me, don't tell me how you got out of jail. Just, I'm glad that you're home. Right? There are times when we... Right, that too. Right, there are things that we sometimes. It's possible that Yaakov could not. He couldn't handle this the truth here, and he didn't want to. He didn't investigate. We never see that Yaakov asked questions. Right. So this
But
is
on Shabbat, did you not say something different? I thought you said that Yaakov. It wasn't just that he was. Mourning over Yosef, it was more because he was mourning about
No, I said,
Didn't you say something
Joseph.
like that?
I did say something like that, but I said it from the Joseph perspective. Joseph realized that simply letting his father know that he was alive does not solve the problem of the rift between him and his brothers. So I did say that, but I did not say it from the Yaakov perspective. I said it from the Joseph perspective and the brothers,
But it's
right?
Okay.
The issue of the brothers' guilt is not solved until they deal with their issues. Now, I think, though, the very last line of the book of Genesis is very telling. Okay. Vayomer Yosef Elachav. Joseph says to his brothers, Anochi meit, I am going to die. Ve'elohim meit, ve'elohim pakod yifkod etchem. God will take you out of this place. Ve'ela etchem min haaretz hazot. He'll take you out of this land. El haaretz asher nishba Avraham, Yitzchak, ve'Yaakov. Right? This family, this people will be redeemed and will be returned to the land of Israel. Vayishba Yosef et bnei Yisrael lemor. And Yosef asked his brothers to take an oath. Hakod yifkod Elohim etchem va'alitem et atzmotai mizeh. Please take my bones back with you. Right? He says to them, you are going to take my bones from, I'm going to die. And what's the difference between Joseph and all the other brothers? Right? Joseph is a national hero. So if you're a national hero, sometimes they don't let national heroes' bones be interred in, I don't know where Albert Einstein's buried, but I could imagine if Einstein was buried in, I don't know, Princeton, New Jersey, the United States would not be so excited about having Einstein buried in, next to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, right? Where he was instrumental in its founding, right? There are certain people who, they're national treasures. So Einstein's one of them. And the fact that the very last, penultimate sentence of the book of Bereshit is the fact that Joseph is willing to rely on his brothers to return his bones to the land of Israel, says to me, Joseph is fully bought into the family repair, fully believes in this repair, and that the bond of family survives and transcends all of these sins. Or to put it the way that Leon Wiesenthal once said, and you can take this to your next family argument, it says, family is permission to hurt with impunity. Right? So that's what that is. Joseph he suffers even their lack of faith in them in his forgiveness, and he closes the book of Bereshit saying this is one family. So
and
yes.
Theodore Herzl followed his example and he wrote in his will that when the state of Israel will be declared anew, that his bones will transfer to Israel, and we did.
Yafeh. All right.
So he knew the story of Yosef, obviously.
Yes. Okay.
Now, question, if you don't mind, for the very, very beginning, why did Hashem not accept Cain's offering? Any speculation? Wasn't delicious enough? Cooked enough? What?
Well, he brought the drek, not the choice. That's the simple answer. The other answer is he's the farmer, not the shepherd.
Is that clear from the text that he brought not the choice?
Well, it's clear from the text that Hevel brought the choice. And so since it doesn't say that about Cain, so we assume that he didn't.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay. So, I'm going to stop the recording.